Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's live where we're broaching colour theory again, talking about how to mix colours and the effective use of colour mixing in our artwork. Today, it's particularly about the use of green in landscape paintings. Now, as an artist, I've experienced this myself. We are given a commission sometimes, and the scene is overwhelmingly green. We've got green fields, green meadows, green trees, green mountains. Sometimes there might be an ocean in the background which is green, and when we start to paint it, it's just a wall of green, and the painting looks flat. It looks shallow. It's lacking in depth, and it's just too much green to take in. It doesn't make for a really good painting. So there's a couple of tricks that we can use when we're painting these scenes like this, incorporating a bit of colour theory, but also using a bit of artistic license. This is the scene which is causing us the problem. We want to paint a lovely landscape, but there's too much green. And like I said before, there's two ways that we can solve this problem. One of them is by using a bit of colour theory, and one of them is by using a bit of artistic license. So I'm going to load up my palette to make a start. So as you may know from watching previous lives, I use quite a small palette. I don't use a lot of colours. I use ultramarine blue, and I use cobalt blue. These are two completely different shades of blue, and these two colours with obviously yellows and reds allows us to get a full range of different tones. With the yellow, I use cadmium yellow, and I also use lemon yellow. So having a small colour palette is beneficial because it saves space in our studio, it saves cost because we can buy a small amount of colours in bulk, and it just adds for a sort of less cluttered environment in which to work. And it's good to practice our colour mixing skills if we reduce our colours as well. So obviously we always need white as well, so let's get some white. So I'm not going to add red to my colour palette yet because I want to talk to you about greens, and obviously blue and yellow make green. So let's talk a little bit about colour theory. So ultramarine blue is like a dark blue. It's a red tinged blue. That means that it's great for making browns and it's great for mixing purples because it's leaning towards red in the colour spectrum. Cobalt blue is probably the purest blue you will get, so it does not have a red leaning. So if you were wanting to make a let's say a dirty green or like a forest green, like a grungy green, let's say, the ultramarine is going to be best because that's got a bit of red in. And as we all know, blue, yellow and red makes brown. So the red leaning in the ultramarine makes any green that you mix a little bit more dirty, a little bit more grimy and grungy and muddy. If you want a really nice and clean, like tropical green, if you imagine a sort of a green in a tropical ocean, then you're going to want your nice clean cobalt. Similarly with the yellows, the cadmium yellow, you can already see on the screen, it's more orangey than the lemon yellow. And that's because the cadmium has red tinge to it as well. So if we want to make a sort of grubby, dirty orange, like an autumnal orange, for example, then the cadmium yellow is going to be best. Whereas if we want a nice tropical, clean colour, like a turquoise, for example, we want lemon yellow. it will be almost impossible to make turquoise with cadmium yellow because it's got that tinge of red in it, and the red wants to turn the colour into brown. Whereas lemon yellow, it's nice and clean, it hasn't got a tinge of red in it. We can see evidence of this in this landscape here that I painted a while ago. It's of an ocean cliff scene, and you can see I've got my sort of more tropical clean greens in the ocean here. I've used like blends and mixes, but you can see this ocean green is more sort of clear and clean, and up here in the fields I've got a more, let's say, a more earthy green, and that's because I've used ultramarine and cadmium up here, and down here I've used cobalt and lemon, and you can see the difference in the shade of green. Another note about these greens is that these shades here, the dirtier greens, like the forest greens, are warmer, so they come forwards in the picture. They tend to feel like they're nearest. Tropical greens, which are clearest, they seem to recede. They seem to sort of fade away into the distance. That's one thing to remember. So your warmer, dirtier colours like ultramarine and cadmium, they're going to come forwards towards you in a picture plane. They're going to seem like they're closer because they're warmer. And the colder, cooler, like clearer colours, which is the cobalt and the lemon, they're going to recede. They're going to go further away. So that's worth remembering as well. So that's a bit of colour theory. Let's just try that out. Let's see what these colours look like when we mix them. So I'm going to take my ultramarine. I'm going to take my cadmium yellow, and I'm going to add white just because it helps you see the shade of green. It lightens it up. It's easier to see on the screen. I'm a very messy painter. Okay, so there we have our ultramarine and cadmium yellow. So obviously you can get different tones and different variances of that if you use more blue, if you use more yellow, if you use more white or less. But there we have our ultramarine and cadmium yellow green. It's a warm green, and it's also like a sort of it's a British green, if you will. When we look out onto a British landscape, we see lots of this. You know, it's a typical British tree green or British tree grass. And obviously we can vary it by adding more yellow or adding more blue. When we're painting a British landscape scene like this, it'll be mainly this warm green, which is ultramarine and cadmium. But like I said, we can have too much of it, and it can become really boring and like stuck if we just use it all the time. So we can create depth, the illusion of depth. We can increase variety, making it much more exciting and interesting to the eye if we incorporate other shades of green, in particular the clean tropical green, if you will. So this is cobalt blue and lemon yellow, and you can see it's totally different. It's much more turquoisey, isn't it? And obviously you can vary that by adding more yellow or by adding more blue. You can get lots of different shades of blue and green, sorry. So just hold that up, see how different they are. This is much more, this is what you call like a warm green, muddy forest green, and this is like a cool tropical green. So when we're doing a painting like this, what I would do is I would start by varying the greens to start with. And even though technically, like these mountains here are, I'd say probably like a warm green, like a forest, like a pale forest green, I might say. I'm going to incorporate a bit of cobalt blue into those greens, and then it'll recede into the distance. but it also, you know, be different to the warmer greens that I'm using up here. So if I start to experiment with that a little bit. If I'm doing my landscape here, let's just quickly sketch it out. I'm just going to do it in this bottom half. Doing a really quick sketch just to outline where everything's going to go. Okay, so I've done my rough sketch. These are the distant mountains, that's the sky, these are the trees in the middle ground, and I've got my sort of flowing mounds of earth in the foreground. I'm going to put a bit of this distant, like tropical cool green in the background, and to make it even more distant, I'm going to add white to it. That's going to make it paler and colder, and that's going to make those distant mountains seem even further away. So already I'm breaking up that potential block wall of green that I want to avoid. So, and I'm just going to block in at this stage. Obviously, it's not going to be amazing, first of all, but I'm just blocking in the colours to give you an idea. I'm going to add a touch of cadmium yellow just at the top of this green. So you can obviously mix and match. You can mix warm colours and cool colours. And I'm doing that here because I'm in the middle ground of the landscape. So I want it to be a little bit distant, but I also want it to be a little bit far away. Okay, so that's my sort of middle ground mountain. When I get to the further mountain, I'm going to add a little bit more blue than yellow, so it's even bluer. And I'm using colour theory here because I know blue and cold colours recede, but I'm also using a bit of artistic license because I know it's going to look better. So, and here's my further away mountain. I'm going to add a little bit more yellow into that because it's gone too blue. But that's okay because there's lots of different shades. Okay, so that's my distant mountain. And then over here, there's the furthest away mountain. So this is where another trick comes in. Even though that very distant hill over there is quite obviously green, I'm going to use my artistic license here and I'm going to make it purple. And there's two reasons for that. One is purple recedes, so it makes that distant mountain look further away, so it gives our picture a sense of depth. But also, purple is opposite green on the colour wheel. So that little pop of purple here is going to make the rest of this green just look more alive. It's going to make it more attractive to the eye. So I'm going to mix a bit of purple, and like as I said before, ultramarine is the blue which leans towards red, so that's going to make a better purple. I'm going to have to get my red paint out now, aren't I? So just a touch of cadmium red. You never need a lot of red because it always tries to overpower the colour, so you only ever need like a little touch of red. So that's obviously like bright, that's like a Cadbury bright purple. So I'm going to tone that down a little bit by adding in a yellow. And this is just going to tone it down a bit so it's not quite so purpley and ridiculous. because we want it to be purple, but we don't want it to be like a ridiculous purple. So I've got like a sort of mucky purple. I'm gonna pale it out with my white. So I've got like it's almost like a grey purple. I think I'm reasonably happy with that. And then I'm gonna just block in this distant mountain. Okay. Might also just bring in a bit of that purple into this mountain here, into the shadows of these mountains. There isn't purple in these shadows, but I'm using my artistic license for two reasons. It breaks up the green, but it also gives a sense of depth as well to my painting. When it comes to the shadows over here under the trees, I might incorporate a bit of the purple there as well. Again, to incorporate a bit of visual difference, break up that wall of green, which we struggle with, and give our painting a sense of depth and visual interest. Okay. So I've got my sense of distance with my colour theory. I'm gonna heighten that even more by getting some nice green, nice warm greens and putting them towards the front. I'm just blocking in at this stage. So I've got my warm greens here, which is the cadmium and the ultramarine. I'm just blocking. I'm doing this really quickly for the video, so I'm not paying too much attention. It's just to give you an idea. So I want to make, in this sort of middle section, I want to make a muddy green for those sort of like oak trees. So I'm going to do my nice warm green, which is blue, ultramarine blue and cadmium yellow. And then to muddy it up even further, I'm going to add a hint of red, literally just a tip of red. And that's going to edge it towards brown, and it's going to give us that lovely rich like browny green which we see in these oak trees here. So I'll block those in. Really rich dark green, it's really lovely. And because we've got all these other greens like the turquoise greens and the purpley greys, it's standing out and it's looking fabulous. If we were using this all the time, this sort of foresty green, using it too much to do everything, it would look staid and it would look repetitive and it would look a bit boring. We don't want that. When we get to these shadows in the mountains, I've already got a bit of purple in there. I'm going to enhance that by adding, taking this forest green and adding a bit more blue to it, so it's really dark. A bit more blue and a bit more red, so it's almost like a black. We'll still be able to see the bits of purple popping through as well. The other benefit of having quite a small palette of colours, so only working with about 4 or 5 colours, is that you've got more mixing space because you can reuse a lot of the colours because they're all from the same tube effectively. If you've got like sort of 10, 15 different tubes of colours that you're trying to work with, each one of those is going to need its own space in the on your palette, so you're going to quickly run out of space. So like I say, I'm just blocking in here, I'm getting a rough idea, but I think you can already see the amount of variety that we've got just with those, well, basically 2 blues and 2 reds and white. We've got an awful lot of variety. I'm going to bring a bit of nice warm yellow into the mix towards the foreground, and this is going to again enhance that sense of illusionary space. So here we've got these sort of yellowy orange, so I've got my cadmium, which is tinting towards red anyway. I've mixed in a bit of white, and I'm going to use just the very touch of red. Red is so powerful, you only need a tiny little bit. So I'm going to put these like sandy dunes in, and that red, that hint of orangey red towards the front, is going to enhance that sense of depth in the painting, because it's going to make the foreground come towards us, and by contrast the background recede. I'm gonna actually use a bit of artistic license again, and I'm going to make that even orangier, and I'm just going to put that in a couple of little spots there and about, using my artistic license. Where I think I see a hint of orange, I'm going to enhance it and do it a little bit more than what I can actually see. Just in the lower half, in the sort of foreground section. Okay, so I think I'm at the stage now where I'm starting to make it worse in my blocking out stage. So I'm going to stop there. Obviously I need to put the sky in as well. Might as well. So I'm just going to get a really easy cobalt blue sky. Stronger at the top, coming down. Normally I would spend a lot longer on this sort of thing, but just for today, just a bit of a demo, just to give you an idea. Okay, so remember, this is just my blocking in stage, so I would obviously enhance this with more detail, and I've just noticed that this middle mountain is way off. Let's just improve that a little bit. Just missed out a huge chunk of the mountain there. Right, that's better, that'll do. Oh, I'm getting to the stage where I can't let go. Right, so here's the blocking out, the first stage done. Obviously I do like another 2 or 3 layers on this, but you can see how many different shades of green I've got with just using ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, cadmium yellow, lemon yellow and white, and just little touches of red. So use your artistic license, use this understanding of colour theory to avoid that sort of wall of green which can look off-putting and unpleasant, and add variety and visual interest to your paintings. So I hope you enjoyed that today. Just a quick demo, quick painting. I hope you learned something about colour theory. I'll be talking more about colour theory in my future classes. Okay, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week at the next live.